Have you ever wondered why some people seem completely untouchable by the world around them? Why insults bounce off them like raindrops on glass? Why rejection doesn't destroy them? Why betrayal doesn't leave them broken on the floor? While you're lying awake at 3 in the morning replaying every cruel word, every dismissive look, every moment someone made you feel small, they're sleeping peacefully, unshaken by the chaos that would devastate most people. What do they know that you don't? What invisible shield protects them from the emotional warfare that leaves the rest of us wounded and bleeding? Most people believe the answer lies in becoming harder, colder, more detached. They think emotional armor means building walls so high that nothing can reach them. But that's not strength. That's prison. That's emotional death disguised as protection. Carl Jung understood something that most people never realize. The pain you feel when someone hurts you isn't actually coming from them. It's coming from something inside you that you haven't faced yet. Every insult that stings, every rejection that crushes you, every betrayal that breaks your heart is revealing a wound that was already there, waiting in the darkness of your unconscious mind. Think about it. 2 people can experience the exact same cruel comment. One person shrugs it off and forgets about it within minutes. The other person is destroyed, carrying that pain for days, weeks, even years. Same words, same situation, completely different reactions. Why? Because the pain was never about the words themselves. It was about what those words awakened inside each person. This is the brutal truth that no one wants to accept. You're not being hurt by the world. You're being hurt by parts of yourself that you've never acknowledged, never integrated, never made peace with. And as long as these shadow fragments remain unconscious, they will control you. They will make you vulnerable to every attack, every criticism, every moment of rejection. But what if I told you that true emotional armor doesn't come from building walls? What if the secret to becoming untouchable lies not in protecting yourself from pain, but in understanding why certain pains can reach you in the first place? What if the very wounds that make you vulnerable could become the source of your greatest strength? Jung called this process individuation. It's the journey of becoming whole, of integrating all the rejected parts of yourself into conscious awareness. It's the path from being a victim of your unconscious reactions to becoming the master of your own emotional reality. And once you complete this transformation, something extraordinary happens. The world loses its power to hurt you because there's nothing left inside you for it to trigger. This isn't about becoming emotionless. This isn't about shutting down or numbing yourself to life's experiences. This is about developing such complete self-awareness that external events can no longer control your internal state. It's about understanding yourself so deeply that no one else's opinion, rejection, or attack can shake the foundation of who you are. Most people spend their entire lives running from their own shadow, the dark parts of themselves they refuse to acknowledge. They project these rejected aspects onto others, seeing in the external world what they can't bear to see within themselves. This is why certain people trigger you so intensely. This is why specific situations send you into emotional chaos. You're not reacting to them. You're reacting to the disowned parts of yourself that they represent. But here's where it gets interesting. The very people who hurt you most, the situations that trigger your deepest pain, are actually showing you exactly where your healing needs to happen. They're like emotional X-rays, revealing the fractures in your psychological structure that you've been trying to ignore. Every trigger is a teacher. Every wound is a doorway. Every moment of pain is an invitation to reclaim a lost part of yourself. The path to true emotional invincibility begins with a radical shift in perspective. Instead of asking why the world keeps hurting you, you start asking what these experiences are trying to show you about yourself. Instead of trying to control external circumstances, you focus on understanding your internal reactions. Instead of building walls to keep pain out, you develop the courage to face the pain that's already within you. This journey isn't comfortable. In fact, it's one of the most challenging things you'll ever do. It requires you to look directly at everything you've been avoiding, to feel everything you've been numbing, to acknowledge everything you've been denying. It demands that you stop being the victim of your own unconscious patterns and start taking responsibility for your emotional reality. But the reward is extraordinary. On the other side of this inner work lies a freedom that most people never experience. A peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. A strength that doesn't require the approval or cooperation of others. A confidence that can't be shaken by criticism, rejection, or attack because it's built on the solid foundation of complete self-knowledge. Jung understood that the goal isn't to eliminate pain from your life. Pain is part of the human experience. The goal is to transform your relationship with pain so that it becomes a source of wisdom rather than a source of suffering. When you've done the work of integration, when you've made friends with your shadow, when you've reclaimed all the parts of yourself you once rejected, something miraculous happens. You become psychologically invulnerable. This doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you feel everything without being controlled by anything. You can experience sadness without drowning in depression. You can feel anger without being consumed by rage. You can acknowledge hurt without being destroyed by it. You become like a mountain that feels every storm, but is never moved by any of them. The secret lies in understanding that your emotional reactions are not random. They follow predictable patterns based on your unconscious conditioning, your unhealed wounds, your rejected aspects. Once you map this inner territory, once you understand the psychological mechanics of your own triggers, you gain the power to choose your responses rather than being victim to your reactions. This is what true emotional armor looks like. Not a shell that keeps the world out, but a core of self-awareness so complete that nothing external can destabilize it. Not walls that isolate you from life, but roots that ground you so deeply that no storm can uproot you. Not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of feeling. Most people will never do this work. They'll spend their lives being tossed around by their unconscious reactions, wondering why they can't find peace, why they keep attracting the same painful experiences, why they feel so powerless in the face of other people's actions and words. They'll blame the world for their suffering while never looking at the internal patterns that create their vulnerability. But you're different. You're here because something inside you recognizes that there's another way. Something in you knows that you don't have to live at the mercy of your triggers, your wounds, your unconscious patterns. You sense that true strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in transforming your relationship with it. The journey begins with a simple recognition. Every time someone hurts you, they're not showing you something about them. They're showing you something about you. Every emotional reaction is information. Every trigger is a map pointing toward healing. Every wound is a doorway to wholeness. This is the foundation of psychological invincibility. This is the beginning of true emotional armor. And this is where your transformation starts. But understanding this concept intellectually is just the beginning. The real work starts when you begin to examine the specific patterns that govern your emotional responses. Jung discovered that our psyche operates through what he called complexes, autonomous psychological structures that function like independent programs running in the background of our consciousness. Think of these complexes as emotional landmines buried in your unconscious mind. They were created during moments of intense pain, trauma, or conditioning, usually in childhood when your psyche was most vulnerable. These complexes contain not just the memory of what happened, but the entire emotional constellation that surrounded the experience, the beliefs you formed about yourself, about others, about how the world works. When someone triggers one of these complexes, you're not responding to the present moment. You're responding from that wounded place, that younger version of yourself who never learned how to process what happened. The 40-year-old executive who crumbles when criticized by their boss isn't reacting to workplace feedback. They're reacting from the 8-year-old child who learned that making mistakes meant losing love. This is why your emotional reactions often feel so disproportionate to the actual situation. This is why a simple comment can send you spiraling for hours or days. This is why you keep finding yourself in the same painful dynamics with different people. You're not living in the present. You're being controlled by ghosts from your past. The path to emotional freedom requires you to become an archaeologist of your own psyche. You must excavate these buried complexes, Bring them into the light of consciousness and understand how they've been running your life from the shadows. This process is what Jung called making the unconscious conscious. Most people resist this work because it means feeling everything they've spent their lives trying to avoid. It means acknowledging the rage they've buried under niceness, the terror they've hidden behind control, the shame they've covered with achievement. It means admitting that the persona they've presented to the world, the mask they've worn to be accepted and loved, isn't who they really are. But here's what happens when you have the courage to face these shadow aspects of yourself. When you acknowledge the angry part, it stops controlling you through passive aggression and explosive outbursts. When you embrace the scared part, it stops driving you to prove yourself constantly. When you accept the needy part, it stops making you vulnerable to manipulation by anyone who offers crumbs of attention. Integration doesn't mean acting out these aspects. It means owning them consciously, so they can't own you unconsciously. The person who has integrated their anger can feel it without being consumed by it. They can set boundaries without attacking. They can stand up for themselves without destroying others. Their anger becomes a source of strength rather than a source of destruction. This is the paradox of psychological wholeness. The parts of yourself that you've been most afraid to acknowledge become your greatest sources of power once you integrate them consciously. The sensitivity you've tried to hide becomes your ability to read situations and people with laser precision. The intensity you've tried to suppress becomes your capacity for deep passion and commitment. The darkness you've tried to deny becomes your understanding of the full spectrum of human experience. But integration isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance and self-awareness. Every day brings new opportunities to choose consciousness over reactivity, integration over projection, responsibility over blame. Every trigger becomes a chance to ask yourself what part of your shadow is being activated and what it's trying to teach you. The people who seem emotionally untouchable haven't eliminated their triggers. They've simply done the work of understanding them so completely that they can observe their arising without being controlled by them. They feel the old wound trying to open, but they don't fall into it. They notice the complex trying to activate, but they don't let it take over their response. This level of self-mastery creates what Jung called psychological sovereignty. You become the ruler of your own inner kingdom, rather than being subject to the whims of unconscious forces. You can choose your responses based on wisdom, rather than being driven by compulsions based on past conditioning. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. It requires patience, persistence, and often professional guidance to navigate the deeper territories of the unconscious safely. But every step you take toward integration, every shadow aspect you reclaim, every complex you understand and heal, makes you less vulnerable to external manipulation and more resilient in the face of life's inevitable challenges. This is how you build true emotional armor, not by hardening yourself against the world, but by softening into such complete self-acceptance that there's nothing left for the world to use against you. Not by avoiding difficult people and situations, but by understanding yourself so thoroughly that you can navigate any relationship or circumstance from a place of centered strength. The ultimate goal isn't to never feel pain again. Pain is information. Discomfort is growth trying to happen. The goal is to develop such clarity about your inner landscape that you can feel everything without being overwhelmed by anything. You become like a skilled surfer who can ride any wave, no matter how turbulent, because they understand the ocean and they know themselves. When you reach this level of psychological mastery, something extraordinary occurs. The very situations that once destroyed you become opportunities for deeper understanding. The people who used to trigger your worst reactions become mirrors reflecting back the parts of yourself you still need to integrate. What once felt like attacks become invitations to grow stronger. But here's where most people get confused. They think this transformation means you'll never feel hurt again, that you'll become some sort of emotional robot walking through life untouched by human experience. That's not what happens at all. What happens is far more profound. You still feel everything, but nothing controls you. You experience the full spectrum of human emotion without being enslaved by any of it. The person who has done this inner work doesn't avoid difficult conversations. They enter them from a place of curiosity rather than defensiveness. When someone criticizes them, instead of immediately reacting with anger or collapsing into shame, they pause and ask themselves what truth might be hidden in the feedback. They separate the delivery from the message, the person's emotional state from the information being conveyed. This doesn't mean you become passive or allow others to mistreat you. In fact, the opposite happens. When you're no longer reactive, your boundaries become clearer and stronger. You can say no without guilt, walk away without drama, and stand your ground without aggression. Your responses come from a place of centered strength rather than wounded reactivity. The transformation shows up in subtle ways that completely change how you move through the world. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't truly listening. You stop trying to convince others of your worth because you're no longer seeking external validation. You stop taking things personally because you understand that other people's behavior says more about their inner world than it does about you. This shift in perspective creates what Jung called the transcendent function. You develop the ability to hold paradox, to see multiple viewpoints simultaneously, to remain balanced even when everything around you is in chaos. You become like the eye of a hurricane, perfectly still while storms rage in every direction. People notice this change in you, though they might not be able to articulate what's different. Some are drawn to your calm presence, sensing the peace you've cultivated within yourself. Others feel uncomfortable around you because your lack of reactivity makes them more aware of their own emotional turbulence. Your stillness becomes a mirror that reflects back everyone's internal state. But perhaps the most profound change is how you relate to your own pain when it does arise. Instead of trying to escape it, avoid it, or numb it, you've learned to meet it with compassion and curiosity. You understand that emotional pain is temporary, that it's information trying to reach your consciousness, that it's part of the human experience rather than evidence that something is wrong with you. This acceptance doesn't make you weak or vulnerable. It makes you incredibly strong because you're no longer afraid of your own feelings. When you're not running from pain, you can think clearly even in difficult moments. When you're not trying to control your emotions, you can respond rather than react. When you're not afraid of being hurt, you can remain open to connection and growth. The journey to this level of emotional mastery isn't easy, but it's simple. It requires you to stop running from yourself and start turning toward whatever you've been avoiding. Every trigger becomes a teacher. Every wound becomes a doorway. Every moment of pain becomes an opportunity to reclaim another piece of your wholeness. You begin to see that the people who hurt you weren't your enemies. They were unconscious agents of your healing, showing you exactly where your work needed to be done. The situations that caused you the most pain weren't punishments. They were precisely the experiences your soul needed to grow stronger and more complete. This realization brings a profound sense of peace. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the author of your own emotional reality. You understand that while you can't control what happens to you, you have complete authority over how you respond. This inner sovereignty is the foundation of true emotional armor. The armor isn't made of steel or stone. It's made of self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from facing your shadow and integrating it consciously. It's the armor of someone who has walked through the fire of their own unconscious patterns and emerged not hardened, but refined. Not closed, but wisely open. Not invulnerable, but unshakable. This is what it means to master emotional armor in the way Jung envisioned. Not by building walls to keep the world out, but by developing such complete inner clarity that nothing external can disturb your fundamental sense of peace. You become someone who can love without attachment, give without depletion, and remain centered no matter what storms may come. The path is challenging, but the destination is worth every difficult step. On the other side of this inner work lies a freedom that most people never experience. a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a strength that comes not from avoiding life's challenges, but from meeting them with the full power of conscious awareness. This is your invitation to begin that journey, to stop running from your own shadow and start embracing the fullness of who you are. To transform your wounds into wisdom, your triggers into teachers, and your pain into the very foundation of your unshakable strength. The choice is yours. You can continue living at the mercy of unconscious patterns, forever vulnerable to the opinions and actions of others. Or you can do the work of integration and discover what it truly means to be emotionally invincible. Not because nothing can touch you, but because you've learned to touch everything with consciousness, wisdom, and the kind of strength that can only come from knowing yourself completely.